The evidence is all around us that this is the true Mount Sinai. Now, I know there are many proposed locations for the mountain of God, but this mountain here in the land of Midian is the only one that matches all the biblical evidence for Mount Sinai, or the mountain of God, or another name is Mount Horeb.
Would you believe it if I told you that Mount Sinai, the place where God supposedly handed Moses the 10 Commandments, is tucked away in an unexpected spot, an Islamic country? We've always associated Mount Sinai with the Sinai Peninsula, right between Egypt and Israel, just like the Bible tells us. But some newfound studies reveal that Mount Sinai might actually be located in Saudi Arabia. On what grounds do these studies rely? Is it true that even the Bible mentions Mount Sinai's location as being in Saudi Arabia? Stick around till the end of this video, where we disclose to you the real location of the great Mount Sinai. Saudi Arabia, a country that only recently opened its doors to mainstream tourists, is now witnessing an unexpected boom in Christian tourism. And what's the reason behind this sudden surge? Well, it all revolves around the controversial question of the location of Mount Sinai. You see, for centuries, biblical scholars have mostly agreed that Mount Sinai is situated in the Sinai Peninsula, between Egypt and Israel. But guess what? Some audacious individuals are challenging this belief and proposing that Mount Sinai might actually be in Saudi Arabia. Now, why does this matter so much? Well, religion has always played a significant role in the Middle East, influencing everything from economics to politics. Biblical tourism in particular has boosted the economies of countries like Israel and Egypt, while religious beliefs have fueled territorial disputes and even riots in the region. So, proving the true location of Mount Sinai isn't just about satisfying curious minds, it has broader implications. Amidst all the chaos, the Doubting Thomas Research Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to investigating the historical accuracy of biblical accounts, came to the forefront. They've produced a captivating 20-minute YouTube video that challenges the traditional belief in the Sinai Peninsula as the site of Mount Sinai. Instead, they propose that Saudi Arabia is the hidden gem we've all been missing. The video highlights various pieces of evidence to support their claims, including a mountain in the area that matches the biblical description. Although other mountains could fit the bill too, black rocks believed to be signs of God's fiery descent from heaven, and intriguing petroglyphs depicting cows, supposedly evidence of the Israelites worshipping the golden calf. The video also stresses the alleged attempts by the Saudi government to conceal this sacred site. Now, if you set aside Saudi Arabia, there are other contenders for the title of the real Mount Sinai as well. Jabal Musa in the Sinai Peninsula has been considered the location since the 1st century, with a long-standing tradition and religious sites surrounding it. And let's not forget about Petra in modern-day Jordan, where another peak claims to be the biblical Mount Sinai. It seems everyone wants to claim Mount Sinai as their own. Mount Sinai has quite the controversial reputation when it comes to its exact location. Early Christians were convinced that Mount Serbal in Egypt was the spot, while others pointed fingers at Mount Catherine, claiming it to be the highest peak in Egypt and the true Mount Sinai. Then there's the Sinai Peninsula, where some Christians placed their bets in the 3rd century AD, and some others said that Mount Sinai is actually in Saudi Arabia because Moses supposedly passed through there during his exile. And let's not forget about Har Karkam in Israel, where a modern archaeologist named Emmanuel Anatim believes the biblical art resides. Out of all the speculated sites, one of the most popular is the St. Catherine Monastery. This monastery, located near the burning bush, is a historical gem that has stood the test of time. Not only is it one of the oldest continuously operating libraries in the world, but its Byzantine architecture and collection of icons make it a must-visit for pilgrims from far and wide. This place is no ordinary monastery. It holds a symbolic significance for Christians worldwide. Now, if you're curious about visiting the alleged location of Mount Sinai, St. Catherine Monastery on the Sinai Peninsula should be on your bucket list. While it's not a tourist hotspot, you can explore the grounds. Just keep in mind that guided tours and recordings are a no-go due to the site's sacred history. From the monastery, you can choose between 2 routes to reach the holy summit of Sinai, which stands at a lofty 2,285 meters. One option is the challenging 3,750-step climb, known as the Steps of Repentance, built in the 6th century. The other is the more gradual camel trail, constructed in the 19th century. Camels are even available to help you along the way. If you decide to spend the night, there's a guest house below the monastery with all the necessary amenities. But one question still haunts everyone: where exactly is Mount Sinai? Throughout history, numerous locations in the Middle East have been proposed, leaving scholars puzzled. One controversial theory takes us back to 1873, when Charles T. Baker, a British traveler and Bible scholar, suggested that Mount Sinai might actually be a volcano. He even wrote a pamphlet about it. His volcanic hypothesis turned a few heads. Baker focused his attention on the mountains near the head of the Gulf of Aqaba, particularly Jabal al-Nur, aka the Mountain of Light. However, when he explored the area, he discovered that the mountain wasn't volcanic at all. He gracefully admitted his mistake, but continued to assert that the location could still be significant, perhaps during a storm rather than volcanic activity. Despite Baker's retraction, his theory had a lasting impact. Scholars like Alois Musil and H. Philby embraced the idea that Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia. They pointed to Jabal al-Manifa near Wadi al-Rab as the true site. These guys were serious about their research, with Musil traveling extensively in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, while Philby was a British intelligence officer delving into the Middle East and North Africa. They believed that Jabal al-Manifa closely matched the biblical description, adding fuel to the fiery debate. Another proposal emerged in 1971 when French scholar Jean Koenig suggested Halal Badr volcanic peak as a probable location for Mount Sinai. Koenig built upon the work of his predecessors, presenting a comprehensive array of evidence and reasoning. It was a compelling argument, but the controversy continued. Now let's see if the Bible can give us any hints on its exact location. The story of Mount Sinai goes like this. After the Israelites escaped Egypt, they found themselves in the desert of Sinai. It was there that God decided to have a little chat with Moses, speaking to him from the mountain in a cloud. However, there were some rules that they needed to follow. The people weren't allowed to ascend the mountain, and the place was declared holy. So Moses went up and received some divine instructions, specifically the famous 10 Commandments and other guidelines which can be found in Exodus 20-23. Moses then descended and shared these commands with the Israelites, who promised to follow them. God invited Moses to come back up the mountain, where he gave him the tablets of stone, inscribed with the law and commandments. Moses spent a good amount of time up there, 40 days and 40 nights to be precise, receiving further instructions from God. This included details on building the tabernacle and the Ark of the Covenant, as well as guidelines for the priest's garments and consecration. Once God was finished, he handed Moses the tablets and they were ready to rock. Unfortunately, things took a turn for the worse while Moses was away. The Israelites grew impatient and decided to worship a golden calf instead. God wasn't too thrilled about this and threatened to bring disaster upon them. Moses intervened and pleaded for mercy, and God relented. However, when Moses saw the people worshiping the golden calf, he lost his cool and smashed the tablets to pieces. However, Moses returned to Mount Sinai with a new set of tablets and spent another 40 days and 40 nights with God, writing down the 10 Commandments once again. This time, he came back to the Israelites with a face so radiant from his encounter with the Lord that it was practically glowing. Now, that's the story revolving around the infamous Mount Sinai. Alternative sites in the western, central, and northern regions of the Sinai Peninsula have been suggested for Mount Sinai. Some theories propose that Mount Sinai corresponds to Mount Yeroham in the northern Negev desert. Others believe it to be located in southern Edom, or Seir, as mentioned in Deuteronomy 33:2. In Galatians 4:25, Paul refers to Mount Sinai in Arabia, but it's important to note that the term Arabia in ancient times encompassed a larger area, including what is now known as Saudi Arabia and the Sinai Peninsula. So, who's right? Well, it's a heated debate that has been raging for decades, if not centuries. The lack of archaeological evidence in the Sinai Peninsula is used to argue that the Israelites were never there, while others point out that the distance between Saudi Arabia and the Israelites' supposed location makes it unlikely. Plus, the theory itself was initially suggested by an amateur archaeologist, whose other claims have been widely discredited. So, it's a tough nut to crack. At the end of the day, whether you believe in the Saudi Arabia theory or stick with the traditional locations, it all comes down to faith. Religious belief, after all, requires a leap of faith, regardless of the mountain you believe to be the true Mount Sinai.